While holding the thread from the spool with your right hand, pass the thread toward you in the groove on the thread guide. Then, pass the thread around the pre-tension disc and pull the thread in completely. Pass the end of the thread through the hole on the bobbin from the inside of the bobbin. Place the bobbin onto the bobbin winder shaft and slide it to the right. Pull out 7 to 10 centimeters of thread from the bobbin hole. While holding the end of the thread, gently press the foot controller to wind the thread around the bobbin a few times. When the bobbin seems full and begins spinning slowly, take your foot off the foot controller. Slide the bobbin winder shaft to the left and remove the bobbin. Trim the excess thread, leaving 1 centimeter of thread from the bobbin hole. Raise the presser foot lever, pull up the spool pin and put a spool of thread on this pin. While holding the thread from the spool with your right hand, pass the thread toward you in the groove on the thread guide. Make sure that the spring in the groove catches the thread. Feed the upper thread as shown, guiding it through the thread take-up lever from right to left. Put the thread behind the guide above the needle. The thread can easily be passed behind the needle bar thread guide by holding the thread in your left hand, then feeding the thread with your right hand. Thread the needle from front to back, leaving a thread tail of about 15 centimeters. Hold the thread tightly with your right hand on one side of the needle whilst pulling the thread with your left. This will stop the thread from twisting accidentally. Remove the bobbin cover by sliding it and lift towards you. Put the bobbin in so the thread comes out in the direction shown by the arrow. Hold the end of the thread, push the bobbin down with your finger, and then pass the thread through the slit as shown. Replace the bobbin cover, put the projection into the bobbin race retainer groove and push closed. Loosely hold the needle thread with one hand. Rotate the hand wheel slowly towards you with the other hand so the needle moves down and back again to its highest position. Pull the upper thread slowly and pick up the bobbin thread, which will appear through the needle plate slot. Push the bobbin thread under the darning foot and pull out about 15 centimeters of bobbin thread. Choose a stitch, simply turn the pattern selection dial in either direction. One of the most exciting elements you can experiment with is the tension. A sewing machine has two tensions in play, the tension of the top reel of thread and the tension of the bottom bobbin. The tension dial is typically numbered from 1 to 10, where 5 represents normal tension and 10 is the tightest. Top thread tension can usually be adjusted using a dial on the front of the machine. If you tighten the tension of the top thread, you will find the bottom thread gets pulled to the top. If you loosen the top thread tension, you will find that the top thread gets pulled to the underside of the cloth and can get loopy. Try experimenting with your machine to see the effects of different settings. Raise the presser foot lever, place a piece of fabric in the hoop, grip the hoop on both sides and push down the loose thread with a small amount of pressure so it doesn't fly loose, and stitch a straight line. When you have finished a section, take your foot off the pedal and stop moving the hoop. When you come to the end of the line and need to restart elsewhere, simply lift the presser foot and pull the top thread to one side while moving the hoop to reposition the needle to a new starting point. Do this every time you need to move. Then adjust the tension dial to increase the tension and stitch another line. Compare the two stitched lines to observe the differences. Next, reduce the tension and stitch a third line. Did the stitches become messy or uneven? Was it harder to control the fabric? Did the material get stuck in the machine? Adjusting the tension allows you to create different effects in your stitching, which can be particularly useful for decorative work or troubleshooting stitch issues. Create a doodle of circles and scribbles to allow you to get the feel of the sewing machine. Try moving fast and slowly in different directions. The image I am going to trace around is a print out from the internet. To make stitching your design easier, it can help to enlarge it. Enlarging the design to A3 size gives you more room to work. You can do this by scanning and resizing it on a computer or by using a photocopier to make it bigger. Flip your image over and secure it to a sheet of tissue paper using masking tape. Place your image on your lightbox, smoothing the texture as you go along. Trace around your figure, creating a continuous line drawing. A continuous line drawing will mimic the sewing techniques you will use to make your stitch drawing. If this is your first attempt at creating a stitch drawing using a sewing machine, it would be more useful to not create a detailed tracing with too much detail, as this will be very hard to sew. Carefully remove the masking tape to avoid ripping the tissue paper. Flip your traced image over to the other side. Place the bonder web over the image with the smooth side facing upwards. This side is the smooth side. The smooth side is the side you draw on. The rough side should be touching the paper. Secure the bonder web to the tissue paper with masking tape. Trace around the outline of the image. Iron your fabric out if it is too creased, as it makes it easier to handle. Place one sheet of baking parchment on your ironing board first. Place your fabric down next. Place your image on the back of the fabric to be used for the motif with the rough side touching the fabric. Put another sheet of baking parchment on top. Iron the paper for as long as the instructions tell you to. I ironed my image for 10 seconds. Turn the steam setting off on your iron for the surfaces to bond. Make sure it has completely adhered before using a pair of fabric scissors to cut carefully along the drawn lines of the figure. Carefully peel off the backing paper. Use the tissue paper you drew your figure on to figure out where the bonder web fabric should go on your white fabric. Iron the paper for as long as the instructions tell you to. I ironed my image for 10 seconds. Turn the steam setting off on your iron for the surfaces to bond. Place the larger hoop on a flat surface and layer the tissue paper over the fabric you are going to stitch over. Align the tissue paper so it sits on top of your bonder webbed fabric. Put the other hoop on top and press them together. Adjust the pencil lines, as it is impossible to perfectly align the tissue paper on top of the fabric without any misalignment. Push the inner ring down and pull the fabric from the outside to make the fabric tighter in the hoop. Keep going until the fabric is pulled as tight as a tambourine. There are many different types of presser feet for sewing machines, each designed for specific tasks. While it is possible to do free motion stitching without a foot, leaving the needle exposed, this makes it difficult to know whether the presser foot is up or down, and it's crucial that the presser foot is down when you start sewing. The foot keeps the fabric from bouncing with the needle as you sew and serves as a safety measure, preventing your fingers from getting too close to the needle. For our work, you will need an embroidery foot, darning foot, or quilting foot. If you do not have a darning plate, you can also place a piece of paper over the feed dogs, making a small hole for the needle to go through. The feed dogs are the textured parts beneath the needle that help move the fabric as you stitch. Lift the presser foot. This disengages the tension. Put the hoop under the foot so that the fabric is flat on the surface of the machine and the hoop is like a well. Lower the presser foot. This engages the tension. The foot keeps the fabric from bouncing with the needle as you sew and serves as a safety measure, preventing your fingers from getting too close to the needle. Grip the hoop on both sides and push down the loose thread with a small amount of pressure so it doesn't fly loose. Put your foot on the foot pedal, and as the engine starts and the needle begins to rise and fall, push the hoop around, going over your pencil lines drawn on the tissue paper. If you stop moving the hoop, take your foot off the pedal. Otherwise, the machine will carry on stitching in the same place, and you will get a huge, knotty mess. When you have finished a section, take your foot off the pedal and stop moving the hoop. When you come to the end of the line and need to restart elsewhere, simply lift the presser foot and pull the top thread to one side while moving the hoop to reposition the needle to a new starting point. Do this every time you need to move. Snip off the excess thread, leaving enough to mimic Rosie's unique style. Smaller designs are more challenging because the threads tend to tangle and it's harder to see the details. Lift the presser foot. This disengages the tension. Always remove loose threads out of the path of the moving needle. They can be left to drape over the side edge of the embroidery ring. I wasn't able to sew over all the pencil lines as the drawing was bigger than my embroidery hoop. To sew areas that can't be reached, separate the hoop and reposition the fabric. An embroidery hoop is made up of two wooden rings, with one fitting snugly inside the other to keep the fabric tight, creating a drum-like surface. Using a hoop is essential as it allows for smoother movement of the fabric under the needle, leading to cleaner stitching and preventing puckering. To use it, place the smaller ring on a flat surface, lay the fabric over it, and then press the larger ring on top. Rosie James will often carefully peel away the tissue paper around the people she has stitched to create a contrast between the white fabric and the slight opaque tissue paper. Be careful not to pull the tissue paper so hard as you might pull out the thread too.